The Young and the Restless Spoilers Shock. The moment the phone rang, Daniel could already sense the ominous weight hanging in the air. His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up, and the voice on the other end only confirmed his worst fear. It was Paul, his longtime friend and one of the most renowned detectives in Genoa City. "Heather's gone," Paul said quietly, his voice laced with both sorrow and the firm resolve that had carried him through countless cases. Heather, the woman who had meant everything to Daniel, was dead. Paul's return to Genoa City wasn't a simple visit. He was coming back to take over the investigation surrounding Heather's death, determined to find the person responsible. As the chief detective, Paul had a reputation that preceded him, an investigator who could break even the most complex cases wide open. He had solved numerous high-profile crimes, earning the respect of both colleagues and adversaries alike. His instincts were sharp, his methods precise, and his results undeniable. But this case wasn't just another professional challenge for Paul, it was personal. His close relationship with Daniel made the tragedy hit even harder. They had shared so much over the years: laughter, pain, and now this deep, soul-crushing loss. Paul had watched Daniel grow, and over time the bond between them had evolved beyond mere friendship. It was as if Paul had become a second father to him, always watching out for his best interests. So when Heather was found dead, Paul made sure he was the one who would take the reins of this investigation. He knew what this case meant, not only for Daniel, but for himself as well. Daniel was overwhelmed, struggling to keep his emotions in check. He had Lucy to think about, his young daughter who had just lost her mother. While Daniel tried to stay strong for Lucy, holding her close and offering her comfort, he was falling apart on the inside. How could he tell his daughter that her mother was gone forever? And how could he move on himself when his heart was shattered into a million pieces? Heather had been the one person who mattered most to Daniel. His love for her had been deep, unwavering, and pure. She wasn't just the mother of his child, she was the woman he had always envisioned spending the rest of his life with. Now, that future had been ripped away from him, leaving him empty and broken. When he was alone, the facade of strength he wore around Lucy crumbled into dust. He wept for Heather, for everything they had lost, and for the revenge he now craved. In his heart, the darkness was festering, fueled by anger, grief, and a desire for justice that bordered on obsession. Paul understood the complexity of emotions Daniel was experiencing. He had been there. He had felt that burning need to make someone pay, to restore balance in a world that had been thrown into chaos. Yet, as much as he empathized with Daniel's grief, there was a limit to how far he was willing to go. Daniel had made a chilling request that left Paul deeply unsettled. Daniel didn't want Sharon to face prison time. He didn't want the courts or the justice system to handle her. He wanted to take matters into his own hands. Daniel wanted to be the one to kill Sharon. It was a request Paul couldn't accept, no matter how much he cared for Daniel. The suggestion alone sent a wave of disgust through him. Paul had spent his life upholding the law, fighting to bring criminals to justice through the proper channels. To him, the idea of taking a life in cold blood, of stooping to that level, was unfathomable. He knew Daniel was driven by his overwhelming grief and sense of loss. But Paul's own sense of morality couldn't allow him to entertain such a brutal and vengeful act. He had always been the one to bring justice with honor, not with a gun or through violence. "I can't let you do this," Paul said firmly, his voice filled with a sense of finality that left no room for argument. "We will find who did this, but we will do it the right way. Sharon will face the consequences for her actions if she's involved, but I will not allow you to throw your life away on revenge." Daniel's expression hardened at Paul's refusal. He had expected Paul to understand, to see things the way he did. Sharon was responsible. Of that he was sure. She had to pay, and the legal system wouldn't be enough for him. Not this time. But Paul's words weighed on him heavily. Could he really throw his own life away, leave Lucy without both of her parents just for the sake of vengeance? Could he turn into the very monster he despised? Yet in his heart, the desire for Sharon's death only intensified with each passing day. He couldn't imagine a world where she got away with this. How could he look his daughter in the eye knowing the woman who took her mother from her still roamed free? Paul didn't understand. No one could. Still, Paul pressed forward with his investigation, determined to uncover the truth. He meticulously combed through the evidence, interviewed potential witnesses, and reviewed hours of footage. His commitment to finding Heather's killer was unyielding, and his experience in solving complex cases gave him a keen eye for details others might have missed. As the investigation unfolded, Paul began to piece together a tangled web of deceit, betrayal, and hidden agendas. Every clue brought him closer to the truth, but also revealed layers of complexity that made it increasingly difficult to point the finger at one suspect. Sharon was involved somehow. Paul could sense it, but proving it was another matter entirely. He had to find solid evidence, not just the gut feelings Daniel had relied on. Meanwhile, Daniel's internal struggle raged on. On the surface, he did what he could to care for Lucy, to reassure her that they would get through this dark time together. But inside, his emotions were a hurricane of rage, sorrow, and helplessness. The thought of letting Sharon walk away unpunished gnawed at him every waking moment. Paul's rejection of Daniel's request had only further strained their relationship, but Paul didn't care about that. His job was to solve the case and bring the truth to light, even if it meant protecting Daniel from himself. As the day of reckoning approached, both men found themselves at a crossroads. Paul, armed with irrefutable evidence, was ready to close in on the killer. But Daniel, still consumed by his grief and rage, wrestled with his darkest desires. Could he trust Paul to deliver the justice he so desperately sought, or would he succumb to the violent urge to take matters into his own hands? In the end, Paul and Daniel would face the ultimate test of their friendship and their morals. Justice and vengeance were two sides of the same coin, but which path would they choose when the time came to confront the truth?